Hope everyone's having a good day today. We're going to be going over How to Live Like a Monk by Daniele Cybulskie. As you can tell, or probably guess, I'm not a monk. I don't know anyone who is, but I became interested in the way they live and more so the type of mindset they have and the discipline to go after what they believe in and how strong of a belief they really have for certain ideas. And my eyes were open to it. Well, there's two things. One is when you think of, or at least when I think of a monk and you see pictures of them meditating out in the garden or somewhere very peacefully and calm and composed. That's one aspect. And the other side is when I saw the monks and nuns who had self-immolated or burned themselves alive. And what's interesting is if you've ever seen the famous pictures or videos, they're calm. They're sitting down, right? There's the Buddhist monk in South Vietnam, famous picture, sitting composed while he's burning himself alive. There's been nuns standing, right? Whatever position they're in, that doesn't matter regardless. But the fact that they're fighting against injustices, against their beliefs or policies, they're standing up and doing it in a way they believe, put their life on the line to believe in, and they're willing to die for it. And I just couldn't imagine going through something like burning yourself alive for something you believe in and being able to be composed while you're doing it. So the way monks go through their life, I wanted to get a better picture of it and understand what exactly do they believe in, what did they do on a day-to-day basis, and where was their mindset coming from. What were they basing their beliefs on, and how were they building discipline, to keep pushing every day for what they believe in, especially living in solitude, away from the general public. And I'm not going to go into too much details about the different parts or different people within their community. I already forget the name, but there's one, there's a term, but the person would spend the rest of their life in a confined room where people would have to bring them food and things so they could survive. But they did all these things to build on their discipline and to grow deeper into their faith, to have the visions and connection with everything they believed. So just to some of the extremes, you could look at it as extremes they took things to, and made me want to look into it and see really what they're all about. It's a whole nother world when you start looking into it. So I'm sure this is a very basic book compared to what you could look into, but it has a lot of different categories about their way of life and even how they got into the monk life. So I'm going to read over a couple excerpts that maybe made me think, or I'm going to share my ideas I had when I read it. And like always, if you want to get any more info about it, read the book if this interests you. But this is just going to be my thoughts on what I read. So the first would be on page 8 to 9. Early Christians recognized that sometimes there is strength in numbers when it comes to individual temptation, and so they began to create communities of people who wanted to follow the path of righteousness but needed the help and the support of other people to do it to the best of their ability. Basically, they decided to be hermits together. Some people may poke fun at people for being a hermit, never going out. But in a certain sense, they were hermits in their own community. They separated themselves from the outside world, and that's what it speaks on. And the point I wanted to share is that being around those like-minded individuals, kind of having guidance and literally shutting out the temptation of the outside world, the temptation of doing things you don't want to do, is going to help you keep on your path. And I'm sure we kind of all know aspects of that. They say if you hang out with a bad crowd, you may be more apt to do bad things. And that's the whole idea the monks were sharing. You build a community of people to follow the path of righteousness, and most likely, or it's going to increase the likelihood you guys all follow it. Page 17. Becoming a monk or nun was one of the best ways to serve God, to devote your life to his service, giving up all fleshly pleasures and worldly ambitions. And I just wanted to share that of kind of what a monk or a nun was, like what are they really doing? And it was to serve God. It's not about the pleasures of the world you may know, or I know, right? All the things we do for fun. It was to serve God. Page 18. Because monastic living required a lot from a person, humility, patience, and hard work, among other things, people had to go through a trial period before they could take their vows. I just found that interesting. They said usually it was about a year they would go through living like a monk before they actually became one. And I thought that would be a good connection to the lives we live now. We're so set on if you do something, you need to keep pushing through with it. And maybe you're too old, or maybe you're too invested. You already took classes, or have got this job, and it almost anchors us down from ever changing it, from changing your major to changing your job to you're already settled in. You know all these people. There's endless factors that keep you tied down. But look at a monk's way of living. They give up all their whole life for a year-long trial. So to me, it's a reminder that whatever we're doing, we may think it's what we want to do, but even the monks had a trial, right? With how strong of beliefs they had, they still let people go through a trial because they realized by doing that, it's going to allow you to commit so much more fully. Because if you just get thrown in and you feel like you can never leave, you may not really want to be there. You may grow resentful of what you thought you once wanted. And kind of like in your own life, how many people grow resentful of what they're doing because it's something they once wanted, but they don't want it anymore and they just feel trapped. And they think of all these reasons not to leave versus thinking of the one reason that matters, which is what they really want to do. So give yourself a trial on things, even if it's physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, investing to try it out. Don't let that deter you from changing your mind. Page 32. Modern doctors have toyed with the idea of giving prescriptions for physical activity and time outdoors, but this is not a new idea. For medieval monks whose prayers kept them within the church for a large part of the day, having time outside was considered essential. And that's one of the things I liked about monks and their way of life and things they learned to appreciate, which is everything around them. And that's just a reminder for anyone listening to get outside. That's why they talked about bringing plants in. It just makes people happier. Seeing nature, seeing life. Because think of what's surrounding us. Nothing is full of life that's around us, right? We have pictures, we have tables, chairs. But when you go out and look at a tree or you look at the birds, the green grass that you're sitting on, it's a deeper connection with the world around you. And don't forget to appreciate it and learn how to appreciate it even more. Okay, so page 35, plants. This is where it's talking more about the plants, green, green life. Plants, besides providing us with life giving oxygen and recycling our carbon dioxide, make us feel calm, help us fight depression, and help us recover more quickly from illness. As monks discovered, these benefits occur within minutes of us entering green space or even just looking at plants. I just wanted to put that stuff in there as a reminder. Maybe someone's watching it and they're feeling kind of down or they're stressed out. Simple. Just go for a walk around the block, a few feet out on the sidewalk, and look around you. Go to a park. Page 36. Eating animals brought thoughts of animals to mind, which brought thoughts of animals mating to mind. And an entire lifetime of celibacy was difficult enough without being made to think sexy thoughts every meal. And this I found interesting, and that's why I wanted to read it to get into their mindset. I love seeing everyone's mindset because we each have our own, but you can learn from other people and see where they're coming from. And I would have never imagined eating meat. There was a mindset or an edge, if you were being celibate, how eating meat could have an effect on your mindset. And as you heard, what theirs was, they said, hey, if I eat food or if I eat meat, then I'm going to think about animals. And if I think about animals, then I may think about animals mating. And then thinking about them mating, when I'm trying to stay away from sex or these types of thoughts, it's going to make it harder on me. And in my head, I'm like, I don't think I would ever think that. But if you're celibate for 50 years, you're going to probably be constructing, not probably, but the temptation may come out of anything you see to tempt you. And for these individuals, they were fighting this temptation, and that was one of their life purposes, right? They were trying to stay celibate. They were trying to fight off any possible temptation because temptation could lead to them doing it. So that was their fight. So definitely it talked about them eating meat, eating fish, they were able to eat a lot of things, depending what type of, I think it went more along the time frame or maybe the region they lived in. Each one kind of had their own rules where they bended them whichever way. But just the fact that some had the mindset where they were taking it, they were so disciplined and so into their faith that they were already thinking ahead of the curve of, hey, what is going to possibly cause me to be tempted to think about sex? And I don't know, just when I read that, I was like, wow, that's a whole mindset I never even thought of. How looking at meat could make you think of animals and how they mate, and that could ultimately wrap around back to you wanting to mate or wanting to have sex. So I thought that was interesting. It just kind of gave me a deeper look into the mindset of a monk, just in one aspect, eating a meal. They had more things on plants, things they had learned. And it's interesting how different foods, and we all go to medicine, but how plants can have positive effects on your body and mind just by looking at it. And on page 41, it makes a mention mint. Mint was useful for headaches. So they were big on self-sustaining within their community. And now, we go online We look up articles, we call a friend, we go get medicine. There's all these different things we do. Something as simple as a headache. They probably had mint out in their garden. They would go grab some. So for the monks, it was just a whole different life than what we have now, or than what some people have now. 43. A huge focus of monastic life was not life, but death. The whole point of a person's earthly existence, to a monk's way of thinking, was to live well in order to achieve salvation in the afterlife. If you've heard the phrase memento mori, remember you must die. That's what they lived for. They lived for eternity. They're not living for a day of pleasure or a lifetime of pleasure. They're living for God, for their beliefs, so that they can have that everlasting life. It's the idea that we're all born in sin and we need to repent and do as good as we can for the afterlife. Page 44. Cemeteries, then, were not a rare sights, nor were they such taboo places as they are today. That was something interesting, at least where I'm at. Cemeteries aren't really looked at as pleasure, a place for pleasure, right? A joyful place almost. And it's probably different for each person, each area you live in. But typically you're going to pay respects. The way I see it, you're going to pay respects. You don't really see people at the cemeteries. But for them, it opened my eyes. It was just a whole different way of looking at it. It was a place of peacefulness, and that's something I admired about the monks, is that they found meaning in different things. Whether it was a cemetery, whether they had objects they looked at throughout the day, and it served as a reminder for different core values. Maybe it was for forgiveness. Maybe it was a painting or a picture, stained glass, that showed them why they're staying disciplined. It showed them a glimpse into their rewards in the afterlife. Right? It was all these different things they had throughout the day that helped keep them guided throughout the day. In cemeteries, I think no one's ever there. No one ever goes there. And to find meaning in a cemetery, to be able to go there and have a connection, I guess that's the biggest thing. They found connection with the world that they live in. Okay. The last thing I'm going to read here is on page 45, 46. And it says, "Come now, brother, what is this body which you clothe with such diligent care and nourish gently, as if it were royal offspring? Is it not mass of putrefaction? Is it not worms, dust, and ashes? It is fit that the wise man consider not this which now is, but rather what it will be afterwards in the future. What thanks will the worms render to you, who are about to devour the flesh you nourished so tenderly and gently?" I wanted to read that because it talks about treating your body like royal offspring. Like it's some nice car that you're going to sell at an auction, that you're going to pass down to your kids. Sometimes people treat their bodies, I'm not going to say so well, because we want to treat ourselves in a way, but it's to the point of not living your life in fear of what's going to happen to your body. And they say, what are you worried about? You think the worms are going to care who are about to eat your body when you go on the ground or whatever happens? And that was the whole mindset. The monks were not living for their body. They weren't living for the pleasure. They were living for what's inside, the spirits, for that, the time after you die. And just the way they put that, I'm not saying to live on the daredevil side. You can, but it's kind of a twist off their mindset. You can't take your body with you, right? So the monks, they're their own breed. There's endless mindsets all over the world. And I do believe in well-rounded balance. Maybe they're not the most balanced in certain aspects, right? We could probably agree on some of those points. But if you try and look at all different people across the world and try and learn something from them, learn a mindset or a switch you're able to use in certain situations, and just out of pure interest to see how do these people live and why they do it, how do they find the meaning to push through so much for what they believe in, and then try and take that and apply it to what you believe in and grow your beliefs into something that is meaningful to you. And that's the goal, to keep trying to progress and get better. So that's how to live like a monk. So that's medieval wisdom for modern life. And it's done a good job of not just giving you a history lesson, but applying it to modern day life. This is a newer book, so it's not real old where you're just reading a history book, but you're getting the history of why they did certain things, and that's what I found interesting. So there'll be a part 2, just because this video would get too long to read over a couple more. So if you wanna listen to it, do it. If you want to read it, it's not really that long of a book. It's just about 150 pages. And I think that's book number 9. So